What's happening? Steve Mayeda here. This is the Daily Awesome Podcast, and today we are talking about anger management treatments, different ways of dealing with anger, and different ways that we ourselves as men get out of anger. So today is July 26th, man, an amazing day for me because that's a very important day for myself in 12-step recovery and those different things. And it's something that actually comes up all the time is anger management and how to deal with this and those sorts of deals. But we're on our Wednesday night call, and this is amazing, man. There's 12 guys on here right now talking about how they deal with anger and how it manifests and all these different things. So if you want to get involved with what we're doing here, man, you want to click the free stuff link down below the description of this video or the iTunes podcast or the Stitcher podcast. And you can also find out about our Austin Men's Development Board. That is free. Men anywhere in the world sign up for it. There's also AMD Plus for, at the current moment of recording this on July 26th, 2017. It's $50 one-time fee you get on the AMD Plus board, but also you get access to all, man, just a wealth of products that can help you out. And then there's our different steps of membership. So look into those. That's huge. Support our podcast and so on. Let's get to what we're talking about. So anger, guys, we as men. And the reason why this came up was because today I'm having somewhat of an angry day. I'm a little bit off. You know, it's a special day for me because it's my anniversary from drugs and alcohol and all that sort of stuff. But at the same time, and we'll talk about this perhaps in another podcast, I've been doing all this body work, and in the body work of bioenergetics and so on, man, I get to this spot where I can be really angry. I release anger from my body. And if you haven't heard of this, we'll talk about it more, but there's so many different ways where anger is stored within us. Where we hear about it most is through our emotions and our actions and so on. But here's the thing. Anger is frowned upon in our society. Anger is something that is seen as bad, or that you should hide, or that you should get over, or that you should somehow suppress. And many times when we hear that, and there's, of course, negative consequences to anger. And if you're angry all the time, it's not good for you. And there's so many poor qualities to it. But if you don't know how to discharge your anger, deal with that, if you don't know how to deal with your anger issues, then you will stay more angry. And that anger will build, and that anger will turn into repression. And that anger, then when it's not put outward, it's not released, it's not expressed. Whenever we hold down an expression, it turns into depression, it turns into self-hate, it turns into all sorts of depression, anxiety, all sorts of stuff. Especially if you have mental disorders like bipolar or so on, or alcoholism or drug addiction, it then triggers us into deeper states of those issues. So when we repress our expression, that's a terrible thing, and we don't want to do that. So first off, we need to realize anger is natural and anger is good. Anger is a part of us. And I'm not saying that as anger is like a great thing because it motivates you. It can, but I always dislike it when self-help guys say that, because it's like, no. Like the Hulk, you don't know me when I'm angry. I do really fucked up shit, especially when I'm in my head, especially when I'm obsessing or in a bad space and I need to, get out of it or so on. So what happened today is, like I said, the spawning of my anger, my irritation. I've done a lot of work on myself, and these things happen. It wasn't anything cognitive. It wasn't anything emotional. It wasn't anything that I could feel that there was some deeper meaning to it. I've done a lot of exploration with my things of my past and so on, different forms of abuse or different forms of trauma or whatever you want to call them. I don't even consider them that anymore. But anger to me was actually something that I was just reacting to, and I didn't even know it. So I started off my day, and guys, if you're in an area where you're feeling more rage and so on, we'll talk about that as well. But I started out my day, and all of a sudden I'm mad at somebody online. All of a sudden a client contacts with something and it irritates me. And then all of a sudden my kids are making me more mad than normal. All of a sudden I'm starting to raise my voice when that doesn't normally happen. And when I start having a combination of those actions within 2 hours of the day being started and so on, there's something off about me. This whole time when that happens, I don't think there's anything wrong with me. I think I'm just like, no, man, this shit's pissing me off. People are assholes. The world's against me. All this stuff that we think when we're angry, right? And so this is what's happening, right? And I catch myself. It's like, holy shit, man, it's fucking 10:30 a.m. and I'm already doing all this stuff. There's something off about me. And now I did know I did some body work. So if you're a yoga practitioner, or what I do is Wu Chi Fa, as well as other sorts of yoga exercises, as well as jujitsu. And I know that when my body or certain parts of my body open up, that I could be emotionally reactive in some certain ways, shortly after those experiences. And if you're a recovery guy, if you're in 12-step recovery or something like that, it's a lot like you're doing a 4th step. And I remember when I was working with my Wu Chi Fa teacher about 2 years ago, I said, "Dude, man, this is crazy. This is like how I felt when I did my second 4th step." And it was just nuts. But there's nothing, I mean, it was like then, I'm writing about all this, crazy shit I did, and it's, I'm basically puking it back up. And he's like, no. You did that with your brain and your emotions and your cognitive self. Now we're doing it with your body. And so I got used to these things happening and not to panic. So the first thing that I say when we're feeling angry, and we can catch it, we know it, because part of anger and part of how our brains work and how a lot of different neuroscientists talk about it is that we have this prefrontal cortex area, which determines basically all the sort of reason and rationale. And actually one guy defined it. One of my favorite ways is it's actually the thing which says no to the impulse sort of brain, which is like your amygdala, your accumbens, how your striatum feeds dopamine to everything and all this sort of stuff. And I'm not a neuroscientist or by any means, but I just am a big fan of reading up on it. And this is this impulse. So we have this impulse coming, and then our frontal cortex has a little bit of a delay, and it's trying to put reason onto what that is. And the thing is that with me, I don't know anger is happening. I think it's good. I'm fed by it in some ways. I'm motivated by it. I feel that it's my right, but I don't know that I'm doing harm or out of line, and I literally cannot see it. So when I can see it, or it does get pointed out to me, one of the best things that I could do before I go further is stop. So I stop everything. I stop. I put myself in the least stimulating environment, right? I halt that, and I do what's called the icy lake. So if you're on an icy lake, you don't try and go to the left or the right or forward or do some fancy shit to get out of there. You stop and you realize you're on an icy lake and it's possibly cracking, and you slowly and carefully walk backwards and take yourself out of the situation and get to safe land. So that's very important. One of the things that I do is I lower my stimuli. I don't take on extra responsibilities. If I have to do work, I do work, but I go at a slower pace. I don't push myself. I make sure I'm fed, I'm eating. I make sure that different things in my life are not stressing to extra degrees. And I take myself out of situations where multiple people would be affected. So if I'm with my kids and I'm watching my kids and we're having, father-son time and those types of things, I can't take myself out of that situation, but I don't take myself out into a situation with my kids where I'm going to be stressed about time or whatever certain stuff that is just harder for me to deal with. I want as little stimulation as possible. Now, one of the other things, and especially I know this from working with so many anger management people and even going to classes myself, is a great experience, is that as men, we feel that we're put in a cage most of those times. There's a part of our anger that is beautiful and needs to be expressed. And we get this in fighting. This is why so many people fall in love with combative martial arts, or even a martial art that isn't so combative, because there's a part where you're exerting yourself or lifting weights or some sort of exercise where you're pushing those things that makes you feel good. Now, as anybody who knows those things, if we're lifting weights or we're doing something competitively, if we do that too much, we're going to hurt ourselves. If I'm doing jujitsu to a 100% level or even a 70% level for too long of a time, I'm going to get injured. I'm going to hurt myself, and I'm going to suffer immediate and very real consequences from that. But the feeling of doing that, or the feeling of going 70%, for a little bit, or maybe just one time, I might bear down extra. It means the world to me, and it's such a release. This sort of image for us as men isn't congratulated. So one of the other things that I'll do, or the second thing that I'll do, is I'll get into my body. Now, I can get into my body through yoga or through the practice of Wu Chi Fa, which is a kind of an obscure Chinese, or it's an American martial art actually, but it has to do with stance. It's not Tai Chi, but a lot of people kind of equate it to that when they find out about it. But I get into my body. So I did that today. I did some bioenergetics work. I felt instantly better. I felt a little bit of a sadness behind it. And then I did jujitsu, and I did jujitsu fairly hard actually for about 20 minutes straight, which is pretty difficult. Most classes are like an hour and a half, but my friend Matt and I just rolled really hard for about 25 minutes. And that was good. But these are just temporary solutions, which we have to realize. Okay. So this first stage of anger management and dealing with your anger is stopping on the frozen lake, walking backwards, getting to safe ground, not being in a place where you're overly reactive and causing more pain and problems, and then doing something to hopefully discharge that anger. A discharge is not a full release. And when you think about this, when you think about a discharge, it's just something which just spurts out, right? So whether we're discharging air from something or discharging some compression from a car engine or something like that, that's just a slight discharge. It's a mini release. What we're actually looking for is a full release. This takes time. This is something that takes a lot of time, and especially if you have the habit or if you don't know how to deal with this. And this is where it gets really frustrating with men's development. So many men get into these angry spaces and they hear about this stuff like Eckhart Tolle, or they hear your favorite YouTube podcast or whatever talking about anger and how to quick fix deal with it and all these different things. Anger does not release in a reframe of a thought. It doesn't release fully in just an action that you do because you are angry. The opposite of that, of feeling peaceful or making a gratitude list or whatever, these are slight discharges to that anger. They're reframes, but they do not rewrite your brain or rewrite your emotions or the maps within your body and the ecology of you. And they don't deal with your motivations and the changes of you. One of the things that I know big time, especially from recovery and being in 12-step groups, which if you're not into that, that's totally fine. And there's plenty I could say about 12-step groups. There's a lot of stuff that you have to go beyond that, right? They're great and they're complete in many different ways for working with whatever addiction you're dealing with. But I feel after a certain amount of time, you should explore out into other things in combination with that. And if you're in a form of recovery, if you had a problem with alcohol or drugs or dope or whatever, or gambling or sex, and you didn't take a 12-step route, that's fine too. But one thing that I know from hardcore behavioral addicts and dealing with people that have issues that are just so ingrained in them is that you'll have to force yourself to change your actions at first, right? And then when you force yourself to change those actions. So for instance, you have to analyze yourself. You have to be able to inventory yourself. You have to look at why you're getting angry or these different habits that you have. And then you're going to have to force yourself to do certain actions which you don't feel good about. You are totally against them in every way, but you have to start doing that until you can start getting normal in that. All right. You can act your way into good thinking, but you can't think your way into good acting. That's a very, very common, popular 12-step slogan. But these are important and they're vital to your emotional and mental health of dealing with anger and angry situations. This is huge. I'm going to tell you right now, you listening to this podcast, you watching this video, not good enough. You need to be a part of a men's group. You need to be a part of something. You could join Austin Men's Development Plus. You could join our MD Excellence course or whatever, or you could join another group. You could join, I would say 12-step groups with different support groups, a church group, whatever it is, but join a group where you can be held accountable, see the same people on either hopefully a daily basis or something very, very close to that, and interact and be able to talk about that. You know, what's happening on this call, even as I'm recording this, these guys for the past 13, 15 minutes have been actually talking about the different ways they feel angry and they deal with it and how it can be bad and how it can not be bad in other ways, or what happens when they hold on to it, or what are the great parts of it, or even getting past the idea of like, oh man, anger is a great motivator, I'm going to use that to do whatever. Well, again, you can't go 70 or 100% all the time. You have to be able to represent yourself in a good way. There's so many different ways to discharge anger, but the real way of rewriting that anger in your head is going to be at first forced actions and then new ways of acting. So what we mean by this is normally, like let's say if my wife and I get in a fight, it's pretty easy to happen, right? For those of you guys that are married, your wife and you get in a fight, and when you get in a fight, you guys get carried away. An angry person is always right. You're both right. You're both angry, right? You're both pissed off. You're both probably pissed off for other reasons. So when that happens, I have to force myself to get out of that situation. I want to stay in that. I have to force myself over time to get out of that situation. Well, after, the 10th, 15th, maybe 20th time, but we've been in a lot of fights, or we've been in one big fight, but we get in a lot of small fights. But we get in that fight. Now it's very easy for me to walk away and take myself out of that situation. When I take myself out of that situation, and I get used to that and it's easier for me to do it, then I can start implementing the good actions, okay? The good actions that can, start to rewrite some stuff in our relationships, like spending time in the proper way, like learning how to make amends or apologize, or maybe I don't need to apologize, but I can bring something up or bring something to the table of how we're going to resolve this and so on. This is going to happen over and over again. There's just actually a situation where, there was a guy who had stepped on my toes for something. We were pissed off at each other and he's around me a lot and I don't want to deal with him. I don't really know him that well. I don't care about the situation. But when I do run into him, it can be uncomfortable. And I was like, you know what? This is a problem. Let me bounce it off some guys in my group. And just that there was like, hey, look, don't take the actions of making it a big deal and telling him off because you don't need to. He's not in your life. Don't take the actions of being overly nice. How about right now, force yourself, because we're talking about the behavior of just doing the normal, cordial, whatever, type of socialization in that environment. So don't do too much. Don't do too little. Let's just be normal and do that and have that speak for you. And so a lot of those times, when we can bounce stuff off a group and be held accountable to that and walk that path. And even as they said, it's like, yeah, I'm going to try that out, but who knows? I might fucking tell them off or something like that. And they're like, oh man, it happens to all of us. We can be open and talk about these things and deal with our anger rather than sitting around trying to repress it, trying to figure out a different way to reframe it and trying to kind of not be the person that we are. We need to release, we need to express. Expression is one of the most important things, and it's really the highest value of yourself. Because if you're not expressing and you get success, man, you're only empowering a Band-Aid or something or a piece of armor that is ultimately repressing you, and it will break out of it. Guys, if you like this sort of discussion or you like the Daily Awesome podcast, we put out minimum five podcasts a week, every week. And also our Austin Men's Development Board is our home. That's for free. Join it, get involved in it. But most importantly, go down below, click the free stuff link, look at the different things. But right now we have this awesome PDF that actually has a 7-day challenge attached to it that used to be called the Evolved Man, but now it's called Primal Drive. And it's talking about the 4 pillars of masculinity that tap into something that's very real for you. Bypasses all the hocus pocus, mumbo jumbo, woo woo crap that we see in self-help and dives deep into what it is where you can start taking command of your life in a very realistic, easy way. And what's even better about that is you could join our communities and bounce it off. We're all about that. So support those things. That's at the free stuff link down below. And you can watch the video of this and read the description. And just down below that, you'll see the advertisement for the Primal Drive. Download that, get started in, and let's be a part of this badass community because men growing together, man, that's how we achieve excellence. That's you. That's me. And that's all of us working together. Steve Mayeda signing off. Daily Awesome. You guys have a great day.